your lead on the PowerCat team. So that's the customer advisory team inside of the Power Platform engineering group at Microsoft. And my areas of focus are on RPA inside of Power Automate and also Power Virtual Agents, our conversational chatbot service. And so the focus of today's presentation will largely be related to both RPA and also PVA, our chatbot solution. And so something I do want to share with you folks, a lot of this is going to be grounded in just recent customer engagements that we've been involved in, recent learnings, and really take the opportunity to share a lot of this knowledge with you folks. And so the one thing I do want to highlight or emphasize here is that automation opportunities are everywhere. And by that, what that really means is that automation opportunities may not always look the same. Oftentimes we do get stuck in our mindset, and we know what we know, but we don't know what we don't know. And so hopefully as part of this session, I'm able to open your eyes and really give you a different perspective on what automation means and what are some of the opportunities that you can go ahead and capture with that. Now, there's no shortage of literature out there, architecture, whatever you want to call, about automation and where it's going. Here's a quote from Gartner this past year about automation and the number of tasks, suitable tasks for automation that will be automated by 2024. Now, this is sort of good news in many regards, but it also represents a huge opportunity in others. So the idea here is that there's no shortage of things that can be automated. And with the Power Platform, we are democratizing who can go about doing that automation. It's no longer about having a small group of experts that have access to expensive tools in order to go solve the automation challenges of an organization. Using the Power Platform, we can go ahead and bring more people to that party in order to go ahead and to solve those specific problems. And that's what's really key about the Power Platform and is part of my message today. And so I kind of alluded to this before. There's no shortage of automation opportunities, but I would say we need to think differently about those opportunities itself. And what I mean by that is, oftentimes, especially in this RPA world, we get fixated on doing things a certain way. And really what I do want to be able to emphasize is that using the right tool for the job. Now, especially on the RPA side, you've probably seen this scenario where you've got a bunch of spreadsheets and there's a population of users that need to fill out this spreadsheet at the end of the month. And these spreadsheets all make their way to a specific network folder. And then there's an automation, an RPA bot that will go and open up each one of these spreadsheets, pull information out of it, maybe do some validation, maybe some calculations, and then go ahead and upload it to some legacy ERP solution. And so I'm sure that solution has been, written, hundreds of thousands of, or if not thousands of times over and over again. And what's happening there is people are just taking an existing paradigm and then basically saying, oh, I'm just going to go do what I've always done, perhaps from an RPA perspective. And, it's, obviously you've all seen this sort of graphic, but it's that same mindset of like, well, no, this is how we do automation. It's always in the form of RPA, and it's always, screen scraping, and it's, pixels and clicks and those types of things. And the whole idea here is that we want to be able to use the right tool for the job. And when we think about automation, it really is all encompassed in the Power Platform. You may not think that Power Apps necessarily is an automation tool, but it is, right? So the example I gave before about using, spreadsheets and everyone filling out spreadsheets, well, maybe it makes more sense to just give them an app, right? Go ahead, input all of your information into that app, and then drive, automation into that legacy system, from the back end, right? You could still go ahead and subscribe to all of those events from Microsoft Dataverse, and then kick off an RPA process to go ahead and do the upload into that specific ERP. So that's just one example of thinking about the problem differently. What all of these arrows are meant to represent is that when we're out there talking to customers, it's remarkable how this platform feeds itself. And what I mean by that is we've been involved in many customer deals where they'll come in thinking, oh, we're only interested in automation. That means we're only interested in Power Automate. And then once they start to get a sense of what all is in the platform, the light bulb moment occurs. And it's always fun to watch customers realize this and say, wait a minute, you mean in the same environment, I can go ahead and introduce a chatbot, and that chatbot can talk to my automations and go ahead and perform actions on behalf of that user. Or wait a minute, we're typically used to doing automation, but we can now build an app, and that app can see the same data sources that our automations can see, and then we can layer on analytics on top of it, and then go ahead and drive some sort of outcome. And that happens over and over. And the whole point here is that it doesn't matter what part of the platform that you're most familiar with, there's always opportunities to go ahead and to leverage other capabilities from these other services themselves in order to really come up with a comprehensive solution that can be used. And the whole goal should just be around, improving your customer or employee experience. And oftentimes that's through efficiencies and just being able to go ahead and drive more results for the organization itself. And so that's where, obviously, I'm sure you've seen the slide in every speaker's deck, so I won't belabor it too much. But that's really why it is so important when you think about solving problems, that you think about it from a platform perspective. We, as Microsoft, are in a very unique position where we can give you all of these tools. We can provide the integration across these tools in order to drive outcomes. There's obviously people that are incumbents in the industry that are going to be very good at some of these individual capabilities, but really Microsoft has a compelling offering when we think about the ability to go across these services, and then having that common underlying platform, Microsoft Dataverse, or what was formerly CDS, AI Builder, and connectors, and it truly does become a strength of our platform itself. And I would encourage you folks, whether you are working as an employee for an organization or you're a consultant, there's going to be opportunities for yourself as a result if you start thinking about it in using this mindset. Okay, so let's just move on to the next section here. And I promise we're going to get into a bunch of demos here shortly. So not to worry, this won't be death by PowerPoint itself. So the whole idea is we want to be able to build agility and bring agility to an organization. And I think this should be one of the most important things organizations think about these days. And how you get agility is really through tools, low-code, no-code tools that allow you to focus on the business problem, not focusing on the underlying plumbing. And then on top of that, what that ultimately means is that you've got some sort of low code that allows you to focus on just the areas that are highest value and basically let Microsoft or a vendor take care of the underlying platform itself. By doing so, you can naturally bring and attract more people into the platform as a way to help scale an organization. The word scale is heavily overused these days, but it does make sense in the sense that there's no sort of magic button here or silver bullet that takes place. It really has to come from being able to get more out of your organization, and you can do that using these tools. And as a result of not having to focus so much on the plumbing all the time, that means you can rapidly adjust to changing business climates. I think we've all seen the stories. I'm not going to belabor it. Like this past year with COVID, the rate of transformation that has existed inside of organizations, whether it's from modern workplace or even Power Platform. But part of the reason why people were able to move so quickly is because they didn't have to focus on that plumbing itself. And so when we talk about Power Automate, I know in the past the messaging around this has kind of been skewed, but it really has become a tool that is designed for everyone. Whether or not you're that quote unquote citizen developer, you've got a pro dev background, or you're in IT and you're an administrator, there is opportunities for you to leverage this platform in order to solve problems. And the way I like to think about this is there's a spectrum, and there's going to be high complexity on one end, and there's going to be low complexity on the other end. But the more people you can bring and actually be able to go after a good chunk of that spectrum, the more results you're going to be able to go ahead and drive. So don't get too hung up on terms. Just think about what is the most productive way that I can solve my problem, and in a scalable fashion as well. So now let's talk a little bit more about an automation journey itself. And so this is if I do reflect on some of our recent engagements with customers, especially around RPA, it largely comes down to this. And this whole idea of being able to rationalize a process. And some organizations are more advanced when it comes to this. Some people have a lot of well understood knowledge within the organization. They've got all of their processes documented. They're run in a very consistent manner. And as a result, being able to go ahead and build automation on top of it is quite easy. And it's something that you can get, move through quite quickly. You can have essentially that process diagram with the swim lanes and be able to identify the technical components to go ahead and to solve that problem. Other times it may not be the case, and it could be for a variety of reasons. It could be, in terms of mergers and acquisitions, which happens a lot these days. There could be, attrition in the organization, people on the move, and as a result, you have some brain drain and you start to lose out on that. And so there are now capabilities inside of the Power Platform and Power Automate more specifically called Process Advisor that helps us to go ahead and to rationalize our process through identifying bottlenecks and with the whole goal of being able to remove those bottlenecks so that when we go ahead and we automate the solution, we're automating the right solution. It's one of those things where if you try to automate a bad process, all you're going to do is make a bigger mess faster. And the whole goal is that we should really be thinking about what we've been able to achieve and is it consistent? And then once it's consistent, then we know that we can build automation that will be more predictable and as a result, give us a greater likelihood of success. So when we start to talk about automation, that's where we've got Power Automate. And naturally, and we'll talk a little bit about this soon, there is a hybrid effect with the Microsoft platform itself where we've got a vast library of connectors and API-led connectivity, but we also have this reality that not every system has connectors and APIs that we can leverage. And so we've got Power Automate Desktop and really can choose the right tool, the right solution in order to go ahead and to perform that automation. Once we've got things automated, now we have the opportunity to go ahead and enhance. And what I'm going to do is take you through an entire journey here through demos where we're going to go ahead and do this, right? Where it's once we've got some automation in place, how can we go ahead and enrich that experience for our customers, partners, or our employees itself? And so that's what we're going to do. We'll see a demo of all three of these capabilities over the course of the next 45 minutes or so. Now, I know Kim Dupree from Microsoft did go through Process Advisor earlier, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time here, but I will go through it just in case there were some folks that weren't able to join his session. So the whole goal with Process Advisor is the ability to understand and improve your business process. Now, naturally, this typically is a large time suck. As a result, like whenever you're sitting around that table, well, back when we could sit around a table, and we're always talking about what is the process, there's always this interpretation of what people do and what people are supposed to do. And even if you're able to accurately reflect that business process, it's actually a lot of work in order to go ahead and to make all the Visio diagrams, add all of the verbiage, circulate it for approvals, as opposed to being able to just know exactly what happened. And knowing exactly what happens can benefit from being able to use a recorder. And so what we do have is as part of Power Automate Desktop, we've got a recording experience that's part of it. We're actually able to leverage that same recorder for Process Advisor. And this allows us to go ahead and invite one or more users to go ahead and record their activities as it pertains to a specific business process. Once we've been able to record it, we can then aggregate those results and then generate some analytics. And those analytics should help us identify bottlenecks and then allow us where we need to spend time and effort in order to fix those bottlenecks, find ways to reduce the bottlenecks, and then also ensure that we've got everyone that's on the same page when they're going about executing their business process. So how this works is you go ahead and you create a new process, kind of think of it like a project. You go ahead and add a recording. You can invite your colleagues so you can share that with others and invite them to go ahead and record. They'll go ahead, they'll record all of the steps that they take. They'll then be able to save that recording where they can go ahead and annotate or edit. So this includes the ability to remove sensitive information. So for example, as part of your business process, you might be entering personal information about a customer inside of a system, but you don't want that PII data to remain inside of the recording itself. You have the ability to go ahead and remove that. Same thing with credentials. If it captured you entering credentials, you could go ahead and remove that as well. It also allows you to go ahead and group and to create essentially the sub-processes that helps you better analyze the outcomes in order to figure out where you're actually spending time. And that's another part of it, and that allows you to go ahead and analyze all of these results and then generating an output itself. I'll just jump through that slide itself. Here's an experience of the annotation. These would be all of the raw steps that you do have, and then you have the ability to go ahead and to group them. So I'll just show you that right in the demo itself. Naturally, once you have all of this done, you can share and invite other people to go ahead and to collaborate itself. So let's just go ahead, let's just jump right into a demo. What I am going to leverage here is we've got the Contoso invoicing app, which I'm sure if you've gone through RP in a day you've seen before, but we're going to go ahead and leverage that for today's system. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to head over to Power Automate. I've got Process Advisor. It is in preview right now. I have an existing process in place called Contoso Invoice Processing. And the whole background with this specific use case is we are going to go ahead and we're a vendor. We've participated in some sort of project for the customer. We're going to go ahead and send an invoice. And we will send that invoice as a PDF attachment. And naturally, once we receive that attachment, we need to process that. We need to route it for an approval. We need to get it into our ERP. We need to be able to go ahead and save that record and send a response back. And so what we can go ahead and do is record what that typically involves. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to add a recording to this specific project itself, this process. And when I do so, I'm going to open up the recorder. And this is the same recorder that is provided as Power Automate Desktop. So I already have that tool installed, and it's going to go ahead and just get things ready for me here. Now what I'll do is I'm going to just head back to my desktop itself, and I'm going to go ahead and start recording. So as part of my invoice process, I need to go ahead and click on the Invoices tab. I need to go ahead and click on the new record. I then need to go ahead and to provide the account. So this could be Litware, and I need to provide a contact. In this case, it'll just be kent@litware.com. I need to provide an amount. In this case, we'll just say it's $5,220. And then what I'll go ahead and do is they've paid, the invoice has now been paid. So I'm going to indicate that, and I'll go ahead and click on Save. So obviously that represents a part of my business process. For the interest of time, we're going to keep it quite simple from that perspective. So I'll go ahead and I'll click on Save. And if I head back to Power Automate, we'll see that we have a new recording that has been added. And we can see that because we've got this status here of in progress, and we know that this now needs to be edited. So what we can go ahead and do is go through that annotation process that I spoke about before, where we can go ahead and remove any sensitive information and also be able to basically group or add activities that will help us within our analytics process itself. So these are the raw steps that I had previously performed. And so what I can go ahead and do is I can go ahead and add an activity. On top of it, when we do click on individual steps, we can see where we actually clicked on the screen, what was the input, the data that was inputted, and we have the ability to delete screenshots, or for example here, if we wanted to remove sensitive text or PII text, we could just go ahead and just provide email address here as an example. So we now need to go ahead and add all of those activities. We'll click on Add an Activity. We've got some existing ones that have already been populated for us. If not, we can create our own. So here we're going to go ahead and open the Contoso invoicing app. Let's say we've got another activity here. And at this point, we're going to say fill in the invoice form. And then let's say go down here and say we want to go ahead and save the record. So we're going to save the invoice. At this point in time, we can go ahead and flip this knob to say ready for to be analyzed, and then we can go ahead and click on save. If we go back and hit close, we'll now see that this record has been updated and it will be ready to be analyzed itself. And we can see that status here. So what I'm not going to do, I'm not going to go ahead and hit the analyze. It'll take a couple minutes for that to take place. But what I will do is just show you the outcome. So we do get analytics as a result that are provided for us. So we've got a Power BI embedded experience. And we've got essentially two reports that are available to us. The first one is the process map. And what this allows us to do is to identify where we've got variance of our process. So we can see here that from launching the invoicing app, we've got 4 situations where people go and directly create the invoice. We also have some other folks that are going ahead and opening the email attachment and then entering the invoice. Then there's another path where people just go ahead and open the invoice document itself. Once we've got that done, we go ahead and create a new invoice. We can fill out the form, we can save it, and then we get to the endpoint. So what you're going to see here is that we've got a fragmented business process. And in order to get this optimized, we need to have some consistency itself. And so the goal of this would be, now that we know we've got an issue and where we're spending all of this time, is to standardize on a specific process that we can then go ahead and automate itself. And so what we can now do is we can also go ahead and head over to the report, or the time analysis report. And what this will do is it'll give us a breakdown of where we're spending time, and also by user itself. And so this is a situation where it's not necessarily a shaming game, right? Just because someone took the longest to go ahead and to go through that process, maybe they were doing it correctly. Maybe it wasn't that they were slow. Maybe it was that they were doing a thorough job from that perspective. And so that's just another report that's going to be available to us here as well. As we would expect with Power BI, we've got a lot of filtering where we can go ahead and filter based upon recordings, date, time, etc. Now this typically does take a minute or so to load, but that's basically how we can gain these insights themselves. And so what this allows us to do is we can see once again by user how long all of these different steps take, be able to identify how long it takes on average, and then also the activity by median time as well. And so this gives you that insight that says, okay, we know we have a problem, we know we have variance, let's get things back on track, and then we can go ahead and build automation from that perspective. So in the interest of time, I am going to keep moving through our journey here. So naturally, as we talk about our platform and what makes us unique compared to others is our existing investments in Power Automate. So for those of you that have been using Power Automate for the last 4 years or so, you're very comfortable with our ability to provide cloud-based orchestration. We've got a rich set of connectors that's growing every week, whether it's first party, third party, or bringing your own custom connectors. We do have all of those capabilities as well. Naturally, and this is another really strong suit for us versus some of our competitors, is obviously the Microsoft 365 ecosystem is massive. It continues to grow, and it really becomes an on-ramp for automation, and it really becomes an on-ramp for our tools, knowing how well we do integrate with this platform itself. That does create opportunities for us. On top of that, we do have great support for the enterprise systems that you're also going to run into. As much as we love Dynamics, there's also other offerings out there, and we do have support for these other offerings as well. And I also believe Kim talked about this earlier today, but we also have the ability to plug in AI, and we can infuse our solutions with artificial intelligence. And naturally, this one comes up quite a bit with customers where people are looking to be able to process forms or invoices as an example, and we can go ahead and leverage AI Builder to scrape that pertinent information and then being able to use that information downstream, whether that's with our connectors or in our desktop applications that we're going to be going ahead and automating. This is another service that continues to be invested in. We've got the invoice processing starter kit that's recently been announced. We've got reinforced learning for fields. There's reinforced learning for tables that is coming in the near future as well. And so this is a service that continues to go ahead and grow. Now, this is going to be, I would say, one of the most important slides in the whole deck today. And what this really means, and I've alluded to this before, is that there's this spectrum in terms of where people are in terms of their digital transformation journey. And we've got a lot of systems that exist there where they've got modern APIs and we can use connectors. And for those of you that may not be as familiar with RPA, yes, like that is, where a good portion of the world is they're adopting these systems and using connectors. But the reality is there's also a lot of legacy applications that exist today as well. And legacy, not necessarily in a bad context, but just this reality that you may not have APIs, or you may not have access to APIs. And so what oftentimes is you get applications like intranet-based applications, or even like partner-based applications where you have basically a vendor. Maybe they're not a modern SaaS vendor, but they provide a service to your business, and they don't give you the underlying access to the data. And so as a result, you need to go in through the front end, not the back end, in order to go ahead and to provide that automation. You might also run into situations like SAP. SAP has the ability to, the integration hooks that you can call back-end APIs and use their BAPIs and RFCs and IDOCs. However, there may be some resistance to open that up to a broad ecosystem or a broad audience. And as a result, you're going to go ahead and automate through the front end. And so really our strengths are this ability to bridge these two worlds. And it shows up in our architecture where we do use cloud-based orchestration. We don't need you to install any orchestration on any machines in your environment. It's all run from the cloud. We've got thousands of triggers that you use today, whether it's processing emails or event-driven events from different systems, and to be able to respond to those events and then drive automation itself. And then where you need to reach out into desktop automation, you can, and we give you a seamless experience of passing inputs and to be able to retrieve outputs from that perspective as well, and really allows you to build the right architecture for you. So much like we talked a little bit about this already inside of the Process Advisor section, we're able to leverage that same recorder inside of Power Automate Desktop to go ahead and record interactions that we make across that legacy system that I showed you. Once we've got that recording, we can now go ahead and call that script from the cloud, pass in new inputs, and to be able to parameterize that script. Let that script run, get the results, and send context back up into the cloud itself. Now, what I do want to emphasize here is that when we talk about desktop automation, it is not just about recording. So recording is definitely a part of it, and we've got rich support for both automating like thick client applications, whether those be Windows or Java, but we also have the ability to use actions themselves. So much like we have connectors in our cloud flows, where we can say talk to Excel, we also have actions inside of Power Automate Desktop that allow us to provide almost like reusable functions. So things like being able to open up a file or to write a file, even open up Excel, call a macro, like those are repeatable functions or actions that we can go ahead and construct inside of our desktop automation as well. And really, like I said before, the key strength here is we've got this rich ecosystem of connectors, and we can blend that in with our desktop automation needs itself. Now, for some of you that may have taken a look at our UI Flows offering earlier last year, that we've come a long way, and part of that has been through the acquisition of Softomota. They were an existing RPA vendor that had a rich customer ecosystem, and really what we've been able to do is leverage their Win Automation tool, being able to plug that into the Microsoft ecosystem, provide some additional investments on top of it, and now we have a really strong offering when it comes to desktop automation itself. And these are some of the additional capabilities that came along with that acquisition that really does give us the ability to compete with some of the familiar RPA vendors that you've likely heard of in the past itself. Here's just a quick screenshot of the basically the canvas part of it is cut off here, but what we do have is that ability to go ahead and construct like a workflow and to be able to leverage both recording plus also the inbuilt actions as well. The look and feel is, some of the branding has been updated just to better reflect Power Automate. Another capability that is really important that we didn't have previously was the ability to include scripting as part of our desktop automations. And so I know probably every single one of you has used some sort of PowerShell or VB script in the past or within your organization, and it was always difficult to have like a catalog or to make a lot of that functionality reusable. And certainly we have the ability to go ahead and do that using Power Automate Desktop itself. In addition, we do have the ability to build some modular automation, subcomponents as well through the use of subflows, much like we do have child flows inside of our cloud flows. And then also the ability to combine both web automation and desktop automation. And that was another gap, or it was much more difficult to do back prior to the introduction of Power Automate Desktop itself. Another thing that's quite rich is our ability to basically provide rich error handling capabilities. And so what you're seeing here is we do have this desktop automation that's running on, say, a VM or a laptop, and we want to be able to capture that output. And what we did as a part of our GA launch is the ability to take all of that output and be able to sync that back up to the cloud. So you're not looking or worrying about log files that are being written to a local desk, like a local desktop, or a local network share that you now have to go ahead and manage. All of that is being pushed back up to the cloud. It's something where you can view your run history from a Cloudflow perspective, be able to jump into your desktop, basically telemetry as well, and to be able to see rich experiences about per action level inputs and outputs, and know exactly when something has failed as well. And so that's one of the key areas of investment that we've made over the last few months as well. Now, in terms of how all of this gets integrated together, it does get surfaced through a connector. So we naturally have Power Automate Desktop, where you go ahead and author these desktop automations. It is environment aware, so you can go ahead and save that script, and then it becomes discoverable. So you, as the owner of that automation, would be able to go ahead and add the run of flow built by Power Automate Desktop onto your Cloudflow, and then be able to discover any of those flows, those desktop flows that you have access to. And once you've been able to do that, you can also choose the mode, whether you want this to run in attended mode, so meaning it will run in the active logged in session on the machine, or unattended mode, where what will happen is Power Automate Desktop will essentially be logged in to a machine, execute, and then log out from that perspective. So really helps you address sort of those batch or scheduled back-end processes that we all have in our organization. So that gets us kind of to stage 2 here, right? So we've gone ahead, we've identified bottlenecks within our process. Now what we can go ahead and do is we can now go ahead and build that automation and figure out how we can become more productive from that perspective. And then the next demo after, we'll talk a little bit about Chatbots itself. And so that's what this looks like now, right? So what we're going to have is a contractor essentially email in their invoice. From a Cloudflow, we'll go ahead and pick up that email, that attachment, and we'll route it through AI Builder. We'll extract the core details that we need from that invoice, and then what we'll go ahead and we'll route it to a human for approval. So oftentimes in RPA, we talk about human in the loop, and this would be an example of that. We're going to go ahead and include the ability for a human to participate in this business process, making sure that the invoice that was submitted does align or reflect the amount of work that this specific contractor provided. And then provided that we're good, we'll go ahead and drive some downstream automation. And then we'll go ahead and close that loop by sending an email back indicating that we have gone ahead and processed that invoice. So let's go ahead and let's just take a look at a demo here. Okay, so what we're going to do is I will go ahead and do a quick walkthrough, and then I'll kick this off itself. So What happens here is, once again, all of our RPA processes are going to start from the cloud. Cloud-based orchestration is a huge part of our platform and is really advantageous for us. So we'll go ahead and we will retrieve an email that includes a subject filter of labor invoice, and we want to make sure that there's attachments. Once there is an attachment, we can go ahead and call a predict model. So this would be a custom model that was developed by providing invoice samples into AI Builder itself. And what will happen is, once we go ahead and submit the content in real time, we'll be able to go ahead and extract the key pieces of data that we're interested in, and we'll use those downstream. We'll use it in our approval. We'll also use it naturally when we go ahead and drive the automation screen itself that I showed you previously. Now, this is going to support more from the chatbot perspective, which we'll talk about later. But what I am doing is I'm just capturing some information about the invoice so that later, if we do have basically a contractor that wants to be able to look up their invoice info, we can go ahead and to provide that. Now, what we've got here is we're going to go ahead and execute on that human in the loop experience that we talked about. We're going to do so using an adaptive card. And using that adaptive card, we'll go ahead and send that approval message over to our project manager here, who will go ahead and approve or reject that specific invoice. Now, provided we've got an approval, we're going to go ahead and then pass those details of the invoice down into our desktop automation. And our desktop automation will go ahead and run and input those values into our legacy system. Then what we're also going to do is we're going to just update that audit log I talked about, which will help us with our chatbot when we go ahead and we want to basically acknowledge the fact that their invoice has been approved or rejected. So that's what's going to happen here. Similarly, if it does end up being rejected, we'll capture that information in our audit log, and then we'll also go ahead and send that rejection email back to the user itself. So let's go ahead and let's just send an invoice in, and I will show you what this invoice looks like once it's been sent. Naturally, it's going to take a couple of minutes for that email to get processed and scanned from that perspective. So let's go ahead and I'll just clean this up and send this across. Now, in terms of the invoice, this would be an invoice that we're going to go ahead and process using AI Builder. There's going to be a few different values we're interested in capturing. So we've got the bill to, which is essentially our account. We've got our contact. We also have our balance. And then we also have the invoice. And so using this invoice, we would have the ability to then look up the status of our invoice using the chatbot that I'm going to talk about a little bit later from that perspective. So let's just go ahead and close that. And then if we just head back out, we should see whether or not this is running yet. So it is running right now. And so what I would expect to see here shortly is an update inside of Microsoft Teams asking for me to go ahead and to approve this specific request. Let's go ahead and refresh this. Okay, we see that we have received the request itself. And so here we're taking advantage of that adaptive card. And that's what allows us to go ahead and have a rich experience here. And so once again, like standing on the shoulders of giants, being able to take advantage of the broader Microsoft ecosystem in order to provide these richer experiences for our employees. So now what's going to happen is we've gone ahead, we've approved the invoice. And we're going to then take the details that were scraped from that PDF, and we're going to pass that down to Power Automate Desktop. And as part of that Power Automate Desktop experience, it's going to open up our invoicing application, which we see right here. And we're going to take that information and to be able to go ahead and drive that screen, be able to go ahead and save it. And then what will happen is, as part of the end of that process, we're now going to go ahead and send the emails out. And so what we've got here is the email that has been sent out indicating that the invoice of $6,700 has been approved from that perspective. So we've gone ahead and automated that process so that we don't have to go ahead and provide all of those manual steps. And we know now that this is being essentially executed in a consistent manner. Now, just to give you some more sort of transparency in terms of what was built here, here is the process that was just executed inside of Power Automate Desktop. What we have done here is we have used the desktop recording to go ahead and record all of those steps that we talked about. Now, when we go ahead and record, naturally, we always have essentially those hard-coded terms, and we don't want that hard-coded term. So what we can go ahead and do is construct a series of inputs and outputs, and then what we can do is replace the static text that we had previously with our inputs. And when we go ahead and call this desktop flow, you would have noticed that there was all of those inputs already defined inside of our flow itself. And it's because we go ahead and register these inputs and outputs that makes those values available inside our connector. And it's available naturally when we have inputs and we need to use dynamic contents to pass that data in. Or on the flip side, if we want to use the output from that desktop process, we also have the ability to go ahead and use that downstream as well. Okay, so see that is still loading, so we'll just let that be. So that's what we're going to go ahead and do here. We'll go ahead and provide those inputs. We'll save the record. We'll then close, and then we have the ability to pass the record or the identifier back from the ERP itself back up to the Cloudflow, which we can actually go ahead and use to send back to the requester itself. And so that's what makes this a really powerful experience, is this deep integration between our desktop client and our cloud client, where we can go ahead and use those inputs much like we would with any other connector itself. Okay, so in the interest of time, I'm just going to keep moving here because we still want to talk about PVA. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about chatbots now. So we do have Power Virtual Agents, which really aligns to the overall strategy of the Power Platform itself. So much like we've democratized app building, we've democratized the ability to build workflows, cloud-enabled workflows and desktop automations, we can do the same thing with chatbots itself. And so typically when we talk about chatbots, some of the challenges that are related to it is just that people want a self-service experience rather than contacting an agent for assistance. I think we've all been there, you know, whether it's our internet service provider or some other sort of utility, it can sometimes be frustrating waiting on hold. So those organizations that can address customer needs using self-service not only make those customers happier, but it also helps reduce some of their labor costs as well. If you can provide some level of deflection through self-service and then include human-to-human interactions when it's really required and where it's really meaningful, that allows you as an organization once again to go ahead and scale. The other thing that's really important here is that customers expect consistency across different channels. So if I go ahead and use a chatbot or a web application or a mobile application or call someone on the phone, I expect that the person on the other end of that request has access to the same information. Unfortunately, that's not always the case, but it's certainly something that can be addressed through chatbots and by carefully architecting these different solutions itself. Now, when we think about Power Virtual Agents, similar to some of the other Power Platform technologies, we really are standing on the shoulders of giants, right? You know, when it comes to Power Apps and Power Automate, there's naturally services in Azure that are being leveraged in order to deliver those services. Same thing from a Power Virtual Agents perspective. It starts off with some of the cognitive services that are available inside of Azure and all of those AI investments that come from Microsoft Research. Then on top of that, we've got the bot framework, which is a rich, capability that's been around for quite a few years now in order to build these conversational chatbots itself. And then we've got the Power Platform. So we have the ability to plug into the Power Platform, take advantage of Microsoft Dataverse, take advantage of the admin controls that exist, take advantage of all of the identity management that exists in order to not have to reinvent the wheel. And then naturally on top of that, we've got Power Virtual Agents, where we have a maker portal and a maker experience that allows us to go ahead and build these chatbots and then leverage those Power Platform capabilities like sharing, like environments, like solutions, like connectors, once again, in order to allow us to focus on solving the business problem, not focusing so much on platform itself. And so what we're seeing a lot of these days is this notion of fusion dev teams or dev as a team sport. And it's really true. It's probably one of the services that best aligns to this analogy or this paradigm. And so once again, I talked about, avoiding having a small group of experts that have to service the whole organization. Instead of why not being able to scale those efforts. And we see this a lot where we'll have like an IT team or a dev team that's focused on building out some of the more complicated areas of a chatbot. It's usually the integration with, say, third-party systems or even systems within your own firewall, whether that's creating custom connectors, building automated flows, using Bot Framework Composer, or using Bot Framework Skills, but then allowing the subject matter experts to focus on content. So the ability to go ahead and to create, say, topics or dialogues, and then being able to them to speak in the language that they know their customers want to be spoken to. You may not have all of those insights from an IT perspective or dev perspective, and really that ability to collaborate is really what sets this service apart compared to others. Now, here's the essentially how we look at basically the life cycle of a chatbot. And it is one of those things when you think about chatbots is that it's not like a project that has a deterministic start and end date. The whole idea with a chatbot is you want to be responsive and agile to the needs of your users or your customers, whoever you're servicing. And so that's why we look at this more like a flywheel in the sense that we'll start with a chatbot. We can seed it with pre-existing content through our topic suggestion features, where if we have an existing FAQ, we can go ahead and ingest that content and it'll build out all of these conversations or topics for us. We can then use natural language understanding in order to essentially route conversation. So when I start typing inside of a chatbot, it will know what topic is going to then service my request. And that's where we're taking advantage of the AI investments that Microsoft has already made in the past. On top of that, we've got extensibility. Our sort of initial extensibility option is Power Automate, which allows us to go use all of these connectors we just talked about, and even RPA if we want, to go ahead and execute processes on back-end systems on behalf of the user. And so when we talk about chatbots, there's oftentimes, the FAQ scenarios where it's like, I'm just going to provide information, and that's a great place to start. But we find when customers go ahead and try to transact on behalf of their users or their customers, that's where even more value is obtained. Now, there might be some scenarios where Power Automate just isn't enough. One could be, say, adaptive cards. And as a result, we do have the ability to also extend with Bot Framework Composer, which is currently in public preview. It was released this past fall. And also we've got Bot Framework Skills. So if you have an existing investment in skills, but you want to democratize who can go ahead and build out those conversations or those topics, that is an opportunity to plug those skills into your PVA bot and then allow your subject matter experts to focus on content. Once you've gone ahead and built your bot and you've tested your bot, you have the ability to publish that bot to a variety of channels. Certainly Teams has taken off big time for us, but also with chatbots, we oftentimes want to expose it externally. And as a result, we'll allow you to go ahead and rehost our iframe or even create a custom canvas that you can embed in your external website as well. Now, once your bot's in the wild and people are using it, you want to be able to monitor the performance. Because if people don't like your experience, well, you're not actually helping them, right? So it's one of those things where you want to understand what are people looking for and making sure that you're able to bring content forward to them to address those needs. If they're not finding value in your bot, guess what? They're just going to stop using it. And so it is something where you do monitor this, you do look for signals, you do look for ways you can improve the bot. And as a result, you kind of go through this iterative process again. And the whole goal is how you can drive up your customer satisfaction ratings. And that's the scenario that we're really talking about here, which gets measured inside of your analytics that are provided out of the box from that perspective. So now we're going to focus on this last end of the automation journey. And so we've gone through, we've been able to identify bottlenecks. We've been able to automate those specific use cases. And then what we're going to now do is enhance the experience. So we want to be able to enhance the customer experience, or in this case, the partner experience. So when we went ahead and sent the email in, as a contractor, obviously we're doing this in a demo, so everything happens quite quickly. We might be wondering, well, what is the status of my invoice? And, wouldn't it be great if I could go ahead and just, use a chatbot in order to go ahead and to determine that? And so what we can do here is let's go ahead and just send in another invoice. And then what we'll do is we'll flip over to Power Virtual Agents. So this is our Maker portal. Once again, I can log in with my same account. I get access to the same environments that Power Automate and Power Apps use, and I can go ahead and construct topics. These are essentially workflows that represent a conversation that I would have with a customer or a partner or an employee. Now, it all starts off with a greeting. And so as part of that greeting, I can walk up to a bot and say, hello, good afternoon, good evening, whatever. And it will be able to understand, using natural language understanding, what is my intent. And in this case, my intent is like, hey, it's a greeting. And so generally in a greeting, what we'll do is we'll provide some information about how people can use this bot. And in this case, we're going to provide some information, just some messages that we'll send to them. And then what we're going to do is we want to know who we're talking to. So we're going to ask them for some information that we can use to essentially look them up and validate who they are. So in this case, we're going to go ahead and ask for an email address, and then we're going to ask for their partner ID. And then what we can go ahead and do is use the Power Automate's Cloudflow to go ahead and to validate this partner information. And so I can, through the direct integration, go ahead and construct a cloud flow that will go ahead and do this for me, right? So I can go ahead and orchestrate this process, provide some different logic, and to be able to return a response back to my chatbot. So in this case, what we'll go ahead and do is we're going to go ahead, we'll reset the bot, and we will just initiate this greeting. And so I'm just going to say hi. I'm going to get asked for my email address. I'm going to go ahead and provide it. And then also I'm going to get asked for a partner ID as well, and I'll go ahead and provide it. Now, what's interesting about this as well is these variables that are being created when I basically respond to those questions, those are essentially global variables. And so they're going to be made available to other parts of the bot that are going to go ahead and use them. And so in this case, if I need an email address in some other part of the conversation, if I've already asked the question, it'll already be available for the bot. If it hasn't been asked, only then will it get prompted. So here, now that I'm authenticated and it's detected that and it's called me out by name, I have a couple of different options that I can go ahead and perform here. So one would be I want to go ahead and check on my payment status. Now here I need to provide my invoice ID, which as we saw previously in that image that was sent in, it was 1012. And so at this point in time, it's going to go ahead and look that up and see that it's pending approval. So at least now I know that this my invoice is still in a pending state from that perspective. Now I could also go ahead and say, okay, I wonder what the payment terms are. Like when can I expect my payment to be made? So I can go ahead now and click on payment terms, and then it's going to ask me what is my invoice. It's less than 50K, and so I can expect that it's going to be paid within 30 days itself. Now, one thing you may have noticed here is that it's a frequent request is like, how do I go ahead and stack some of these options vertically? And so I was able to do this using the Bot Framework Composer and also through essentially a thumbnail card. So this integration that we've recently introduced allows me to go ahead and to extend my bot using that capability of Bot Framework Composer itself. And so that's what is available here. That's what's happening here. After I go through my greeting, I will then go ahead and call essentially this dialogue or this topic that's in Bot Framework Composer called menu itself. Okay, so now what we can do is let's go ahead and make this person happy. So let's just go ahead and approve their request here. We will see the RPA process kick off once again. But now what we will be able to do is we will be able to go ahead and look this up to determine the payment status itself. Okay, so there was a question, triggers to RPA didn't get you. Okay, so when we talk about triggers, we basically, a trigger is your entry point into a cloud flow. And so this would be an example of a trigger when a new email arrives. And so we have a few different classes of triggers. One would be based upon a data event like this. Others would be, say, manually. So we have basically a button trigger that allows you to go ahead and manually kick off a flow. Or we have scheduling. So you can go ahead and create a schedule that says, every Monday morning at 6 a.m., go run this job. So those would be all examples of triggers. And so every connector, well, I shouldn't say every, because some connectors don't support triggers, but in general, connectors will have triggers, and we can go ahead and include those in our Cloudflow, and then as a result, go ahead and call our downstream desktop automation itself. Okay, so that RPA process has gone ahead and has completed. So I should be able now to go ahead and run my payment status. And here it's asking for my invoice ID, which I will once again provide 1012. And hopefully this now says approved because we went ahead and approved it from Microsoft Teams itself. Now, just quickly, what I do want to show you here is notice that when I did ask for my payment status, I only provided my invoice ID. And what we're going to see here is that, and this goes back to that global variable stuff, is that we had to provide the partner ID and the invoice ID as part of this request to get the invoice status. But because I had already captured the partner ID using a global variable as part of my greeting, I didn't get prompted for that. So that's a feature that you can also leverage in order to go ahead and just have a better experience for your customers or end users itself. So I know we're almost out of time here, but hopefully you sort of enjoyed that journey, the automation journey, and sort of what that means. And I think the core point with all of this is that we've got a rich integrated experience here. And I would encourage you to not only think of like how you've done automation in the past, but think about what new ways you might be able to go ahead and solve that problem that provides an even better experience for your audience, whether that's internal employees, external partners, or external customers itself. So with that, I'll leave you with a call to action here. If you're interested in some of the content I showed you around RPA and you want to go give this a try, we've got the RPA in a Day package. It does include the sample app that I showed you here today. There's also a lab on the Process Advisor capabilities. We also have PVA in a Day, where you can go ahead and build chatbots and find ways to use Power Automate to integrate from that perspective. And then also wanted to show you or share with you some additional content. So as part of the PowerCat team that I'm part of, we do have regular content. Automate It is focused predominantly on RPA, use cases and scenarios. And then we also have something similar for chatbots in a series we call Build a Bot. And then lastly, I'll leave you with my Twitter coordinates and then also my personal YouTube channel as well, where I typically post weekly on Power Automate or Power Virtual Agents content. So once again, thanks for your time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Well, thank you for that, Kent, and I'm sure these links are going to be highly valuable to all the attendees, so I'll make sure I share them in the chat window for everyone to have access to. And I think we're all excited how you're making development a team sport. That's something which will definitely make our day-to-day jobs a lot more fun and productive. So we're really behind you on that one. So thanks again, Ken, for sharing your time today and sharing that announcement around the Process Advisor, as well as the features that you showed with the Power Virtual Agent, as well as RPA. There's so much to use there right now to start to begin that journey for many of the organizations that haven't even begun yet. These tools are allowing organizations to start that journey of understanding their process so they can begin automating them. So really, again, Ken, thank you so much for today. It's been a great pleasure.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me, and kudos to you and the other organizers for putting on an event of this, both depth and breadth. It's almost hard to believe that it's going to go on for 5 weeks or I guess 4 weeks here. So, kudos to all of you that have been involved in making this a success.
Thank you so much again, Ken. So I will be sharing that information in the chat window. So don't worry, everyone. You will get access to all those materials that Ken mentioned. Especially, I know you're interested in the RP in a day and PV in a day workshops. So I'll definitely share that in the chat now. Now, over to the next session. And again, we have another guest speaker from Microsoft. It's none other than Ali Yousufi. Hello there, Ali.
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone.
Hi there.
Okay?
So, for those who are not aware, I'm a personal fan of Ali. I've